The pounding on our front door wasn't just loud. It was violent. Each thud rattled the frames on the living room wall like the house itself was shivering. Oakwood Heights was the kind of place where mornings usually meant kids racing bikes down the sidewalk, sprinklers misting over manicured lawns, and the occasional dog barking at a passing mail truck. But this sounded like something ripped straight from a crime drama. I yanked the door open, and there they were, 4 men shoulder to shoulder. Their uniforms were navy blue, crisp, and too perfect. Sunglasses covered their eyes, their hands already firm on holstered pistols. No nod, no polite introduction, just a heavy silence that carried the weight of bad news. The one in front finally spoke, his jaw set like stone. "Step aside, sir. Your wife is coming with us." His words dropped like lead in my chest. My pulse hammered so hard it drowned out everything else. Authority doesn't usually rattle me, but something was wrong. No badges glinted in the sunlight. No name tags. No papers. Just 4 men in matching outfits with guns and an order that didn't add up. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Curtains shifted in a neighbor's window. Oakwood Heights wasn't a place where secrets stayed hidden. And now, the entire street was watching me face off against these strangers. "You've got the wrong house," I said, my grip tightening on the doorknob. "Or the wrong people." The leader didn't so much as blink. His voice stayed flat, like he was reading from a script. "Mr. Thompson, don't make this harder. Call her out. Now." Behind me, soft footsteps creaked across the hardwood. Then came Sarah's voice, calm, steady, not a hint of fear. "Michael, what's happening?" I turned just enough to meet her eyes. "They say they're here for you." Her answer wasn't shock. It wasn't panic. It was iron. "I'll handle this." The screen door groaned open, and Sarah stepped past me into the sunlight. Not in pajamas. Not in hesitation. She stood tall in her sheriff's uniform, badge gleaming like a flare, radio crackling faintly at her shoulder. The effect on the men was instant. One loosened his grip on his gun. Another's throat bobbed with a nervous swallow. Their perfect formation faltered, cracks showing in the performance. Sarah's voice cut through the tension, calm but commanding. "You're pointing weapons at my husband. Holster them. Now." The leader tried to push back, fumbling for authority. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern Sheriff Sarah Thompson." But Sarah tapped her badge, her eyes never leaving his. "ID on my belt. Dispatch on my radio. If you're real, you know who I am already. If you're not, you're impersonating law enforcement with live firearms. That's a decade behind bars minimum." The silence that followed was heavier than the heat on the porch. Across the street, old Mr. Jenkins leaned against his mailbox, phone raised, recording every second. Sarah pressed her radio. Her voice was steady, official. "Dispatch, this is Sheriff 214 Sierra. For unidentified armed subjects at my residence. Claiming a warrant for my arrest. Confirm any active orders." The response came fast, loud enough for everyone to hear. 214 Sierra. Negative. No warrants. Units en route. Copy for impersonators. Color drained from the leader's face. He darted a glance at his men. One muttered. One stared at the ground. The other froze stiff as a mannequin under a spotlight. Sarah didn't flinch. "You heard dispatch. Drop your weapons. Hands visible. Wait here for my deputies. Or keep playing games and explain to a judge why you thought kidnapping a sheriff on her own porch was a good idea." The air felt thicker, the sunlight hotter, and beneath it all, sirens began to wail in the distance. Soft at first, then swelling louder with every beat of my heart. Real law was coming, and these men knew it. I watched their jaws tighten, fingers twitch, eyes flicking toward the street like maybe, just maybe, an escape route would appear. But deep down, I knew this wasn't a simple mistake. This was the spark of something much bigger. "Ma'am, we're not here to argue. You're under arrest. Step forward now." Sarah didn't blink, didn't even shift her weight. Her voice came calm, almost kind, but every word landed like a hammer. "On what charge? Show me the paperwork." Show me the judge's signature. Or admit you've got nothing. The silence that followed was suffocating. The morning sun bounced hard off their phony badges, a cheap shine compared to the real thing. Across the street, Mrs. Parker clutched her phone high above her head, bathrobe flapping in the breeze. 2 houses down, the mail carrier froze in place, satchel hanging heavy at his side. My front yard wasn't a yard anymore. It was a stage, and the neighborhood had filled every seat. The second man broke the silence, his voice lower, uneasy. Sir, please step aside. Don't make this harder. I shook my head, keeping my hand on the frame of the door. You stepped onto my property. You pointed guns at me. You threatened my wife. It's already hard. Sarah moved forward. One slow step, sunlight flaring against her badge like it had a spotlight of its own. Gentlemen, she said evenly, I've cuffed people for less than what you're doing. Impersonating officers, brandishing firearms, attempted kidnapping. That's a rap sheet longer than your courage right now. And those sirens you hear? They mean you won't be explaining this to me. You'll be explaining it to my deputies. The leader's jaw flexed. He raised his pistol higher, desperate to claw back control. You think that badge makes you untouchable? Sarah's eyes narrowed, her voice sharper now, steel sliding into velvet. No, it makes me real, which is more than I can say for you. The crowd across the street grew thicker, the murmur swelling. Phones pointed, fingers whispered. The word fake rolled off lips like a ripple turning into a wave. The imposters could hear it, and it rattled them. The third man cracked first. His hands trembled, his weapon shaking like it weighed 100 pounds. This wasn't supposed to go like this, he muttered. Shut up, the leader barked, but the command rang hollow. The fracture in his control was wide enough for everyone to see. Sarah seized the moment. Drop your weapons. Hands where I can see them. If you cooperate, maybe the DA goes easy. Keep resisting, and you'll be the lead story tonight, for all the wrong reasons. The sirens were close now, screaming down Laurel Avenue, bouncing off brick walls and window panes. The leader flicked a glance toward the corner, his options shrinking by the second. Fight, flee, or fold under the weight of real authority. He chose bluster. This isn't over, he growled, but even as he said it, his men weren't buying in. One lowered his gun. Another shuffled back. The fourth couldn't stop staring at the ground, like maybe the pavement would swallow him whole. Sarah didn't move, didn't blink. She was stone unshaken. And in that stillness, it hit me. Their power had been nothing but costume and confidence. The moment they were challenged by someone real, they looked like what they were. Frauds playing dress-up. The sirens crescendoed. Tires screeched. And then the street erupted in red and blue light, flooding across lawns, windows, and the imposters' pale faces. 2 patrol cars skidded to a stop. Doors flew open. Deputies in tan uniforms surged out, weapons trained, voices hard as thunder. Drop the guns. Now. The 4 men froze, their charade collapsing under flashing lights and leveled barrels. The leader clenched his jaw, but even he saw the jaws of the trap. Slowly, too slowly, he lowered his pistol, letting it clatter against the concrete. The others followed, one by one. The sound of surrender echoed louder than any of their threats. Sarah stayed on the porch, steady as granite, her radio alive at her shoulder. Dispatch, this is Sheriff 214 Sierra. Confirm units on scene. The reply came strong, broadcast for every neighbor filming with their phones. Confirmed. Units present. For impersonators detained. That single word, impersonators, rolled across Oakwood Heights like a thunderclap. Mrs. Parker gasped. Mr. Jenkins muttered from his mailbox. I knew something was off. The neighborhood knew the truth now. And so did the imposters. Phones rose higher, screens glowing in the morning light, recording every heartbeat of the standoff. Our quiet little block had turned into a stage, and the story was writing itself. One of the men, the youngest, stood cuffed, staring at the pavement. His lips moved in a whisper I almost caught. Wasn't supposed to go this way. Sarah stepped down from the porch, her silver badge catching a beam of sunlight. The deputies instinctively made room for her. This wasn't their show anymore, it was hers. "You four picked the wrong house, the wrong morning, and the wrong sheriff," she said, her voice clear enough to cut through every microphone and lens. "Oakwood Heights is safe. You're done here." The leader tried one last time to scrape together authority. His voice came hoarse, bitter. "This isn't the end." Sarah leaned in just enough that only he and I could hear. Her words landed like a verdict. "It is for you." The neighborhood buzzed with whispers, the hum of dozens of phones uploading video in real time. By nightfall, half the county would know what we had lived through. But as I watched those fake officers shoved into real patrol cars, a heavier thought took root. This wasn't random. For men with guns and uniforms don't just appear out of nowhere. This was planned, funded, directed, and whoever was behind it had wanted us. Red and blue lights still pulsed across every window and lawn when another figure came striding up the sidewalk. Gregory Allen. Pressed khakis, golf shirt tucked too tight, clipboard clutched like a weapon. The HOA president himself, marching straight into the chaos with his face flushed and his chest heaving. "This is outrageous," he barked. "You can't just haul them off like criminals. They were here on official business." Sarah turned her head slowly, her eyes narrowing to slits. "Official business?" "Yes." Gregory puffed up, voice cracking but determined. "They're compliance officers hired by this community. They have the authority to enforce regulations when residents refuse to follow the rules. You have been ignoring notices, Sheriff Thompson, and the board will not tolerate exceptions." The crowd stirred like a shaken hive. Neighbors whispered, phones zoomed. Every lens now aimed not at the cruisers but at Gregory, the man they'd been paying dues to for years. Sarah stepped forward, boots hitting pavement like gavel strikes. Deputies stepped aside. This wasn't law versus lawbreakers anymore. This was personal. "Compliance officers," she said, each syllable sharp as glass. "Real compliance officers don't dress up in dark blue uniforms, wave loaded guns at civilians, and flash forged warrants signed by imaginary judges." Gregory's face blotched red, sweat glistening under the sun. "You're twisting this. They were just doing their job." Sarah snapped, her voice finally rising with raw fire. "They impersonated law enforcement. That's a felony. And you," she jabbed a finger at his clipboard, "you paid for it. You endangered every family on this block." A gasp rolled through the crowd. Mrs. Parker muttered, loud enough for phones to catch, "Paid for it?" Gregory's bluster faltered. He stammered, searching for ground. "Now wait just a minute. The board approved security measures. That's all." Sarah didn't let him breathe. "Security doesn't mean pointing guns at my husband on our front porch. It doesn't mean forged warrants. You call this compliance? A jury will call it something else." For the first time in years, Gregory Allen looked small, pathetic. His neighbors, the same ones who once nodded at his newsletters and signed his petitions without a thought, now stared at him with eyes that burned. "You put us all at risk," someone shouted from the sidewalk. "My kids were outside," another voice cried. Phones kept recording, each word turning into evidence. Gregory's hand twitched on his clipboard like he wanted to raise it as a shield, but there was no shield left. Not from Sarah, not from the deputies, and not from the neighbors who finally saw him for what he was. And in that moment, it hit me, the four imposters had never been the true danger. The real threat was the man who thought he could buy them. For a heartbeat, Oakwood Heights held its breath. Deputies' hands hovered near holsters. Neighbors pressed closer, phones glowing like lanterns. Gregory Allen, red-faced and sputtering, tried to salvage his story about compliance officers. And then everything cracked. One of the cuffed imposters, the jittery one with a scar dragging down his cheek, snapped. The deputies had been sloppy, his wrists bound in front instead of behind. With a guttural roar, he tore free of their grip and lunged straight for Sarah. The crowd gasped in unison. Mrs. Parker screamed. He came at her wild-eyed, cuffs swinging like a steel club, the other hand clawing for the set on Sarah's belt. Spit flew as he bellowed, "You're coming with us, Sheriff." Time slowed. I saw sunlight flash on the swinging cuffs. I saw Sarah's eyes narrow, calm, surgical, precise. Then she moved. Pivot. A grab. A twist. The crack of bone echoed across the lawn like a gunshot. The man howled, collapsing as Sarah swept his legs out from under him. He hit the porch face first, cuffed hands pinned awkwardly behind his back. Sarah was already on him, one knee driving his shoulder down, her free hand yanking the spare cuffs from her belt in a single fluid motion. "Attempted assault on a sheriff," she said, voice cutting through his groans like glass. "Add that to the list." The neighborhood erupted. Cheers, shouts, phones clicking in rapid fire. "Get him, Sheriff," Mr. Jenkins roared. "About time," someone else hollered. Deputies swarmed in, securing the scarred man properly this time, double-locking his wrists and dragging him upright. His swagger had drained away, leaving only pale sweat dripping down his scarred cheek. Sarah rose, brushing dust from her uniform, badge flashing brighter than ever. She didn't look winded. She looked untouchable. Gregory Allen staggered back, eyes darting between Sarah, the deputies, and the neighbors' cameras. His grand speech about compliance officers had crumbled into dust. All he could mutter was, This wasn't how it was supposed to happen." But no one was listening. Sarah's glance flicked toward me, and in that moment I understood. This wasn't just defense. It was exposure. She was showing everyone, on camera in daylight, exactly who the real threats were. The leader of the imposters, still cuffed near the cruiser, tried to salvage a shred of bravado. "You think this ends here? We're not alone." Sarah locked eyes with him, steady as stone. "Then let them come. I'll be waiting." He looked away. He had no answer. Neighbors pressed closer, encircling Gregory, the deputies, and us. Questions flew like arrows. Who sent them? Where did they get uniforms? Why target us? Sarah raised her hand, and the noise stilled. "There will be answers," she promised. "But for now, the danger is contained. You're safe. That's what matters." Her words settled over Oakwood Heights like a shield. Fear hardened into resolve. Neighbors nodded, murmuring thanks, raising phones higher to capture every frame. Gregory's face turned ashen. For years, he had lorded over this neighborhood, dictating grass height, mailbox paint, the shade of curtains. Now, under the glare of 100 lenses, he was shrinking. His power wasn't just broken. It was gone. And standing on that porch, I felt the weight of it settle in my gut. The imposters were never the true danger. The real threat was the man who had hired them. Sirens screamed louder. More cruisers tore around the corner. 3, 4, lights flooding the street until Oakwood Heights glowed like the center of a manhunt. Deputies spilled out fast, shotguns leveled, commands cracking like thunder. "Hands on your head. On your knees now." The remaining imposters folded instantly, bravado bleeding out of them. They dropped to the asphalt, wrists cuffed tight behind their backs. The leader tried to spit out a threat, but a deputy slammed him against a cruiser and read him his rights. His words died in his throat. And then it happened. Cheers. Actual cheers. The neighborhood roared like a stadium, voices rising as one. People clapped, whistled, shouted Sarah's name. For the first time all morning, Oakwood Heights didn't sound afraid. It sounded alive. Phones were everywhere now, porches, driveways, even the roof of Jenkins's garage. Kids who'd been dragged inside earlier peeked out through curtains, wide-eyed. Gregory Allen stood frozen at the curb, clutching his clipboard like it was a life raft. Every time a deputy barked an order, he flinched. The man who had once ruled Oakwood Heights with memos and fines now looked like the smallest figure on the block. Sarah stayed calm, hands folded behind her back, badge flashing silver in the sun. She didn't need to shout. This was her arena now. A sergeant jogged up, saluting. "Sheriff, suspects are secured. Weapons confiscated. No IDs. No departmental markings. Just uniforms." Sarah gave a single nod. "Good. Book them for impersonating law enforcement, unlawful detainment, brandishing, and attempted assault. We'll stack charges properly once we've got statements. The sergeant hesitated, his gaze flicking toward Gregory. Sarah let the silence stretch, every neighbor leaning in, waiting for her call. Gregory's face blanched, but he said nothing. "Not yet," Sarah said finally, her voice low but firm. "But don't let him leave. He has questions to answer." A deputy peeled off to shadow the HOA president. Gregory's lips twitched like he wanted to object, but one look at Sarah told him better. As the imposters were loaded into cruisers, Sarah climbed one step up our porch and faced the crowd. "You all saw it," she said, her voice carrying like a bell. "These men came here dressed as officers. They weren't. They tried to arrest your sheriff with forged authority and loaded weapons. That ends today. This neighborhood is safe. And whoever sent them," her eyes cut to Gregory, who shrank even smaller, "will answer for it." Applause burst like a dam breaking. Not polite golf claps, raw, furious relief. "Thanks, Sheriff," someone shouted. "We've got your back," another called. About time someone stood up to the board. Gregory's hands trembled around his clipboard. Every phone was on him now, every lens capturing his sweat, his silence. The king of Oakwood Heights was cornered. For the first time in hours, I exhaled. The imposters were gone. The street buzzed with real deputies. The neighbors were united. For a moment, it felt like victory. But Sarah wasn't smiling. I knew that look. Eyes narrowed, mind already 2 steps ahead. She leaned close enough for only me to hear. "This wasn't freelance," she whispered. "Somebody planned it, paid for it. And I think we both know who." I glanced at Gregory. He shifted his weight, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Cruisers pulled away, sirens fading. Relief mingled with anger as neighbors whispered, phones still raised. The balance of power in Oakwood Heights had shifted forever. Then a deputy jogged back across the lawn, a folded sheet of paper in gloved hands. He looked uneasy, like the page itself reeked. "Sheriff," he said, "found this in the jacket of the scarred one. You need to see it." Sarah unfolded the paper. I leaned just enough to read. County letterhead. Judge's seal. Big block letters screamed. Order of detention. And under it, my wife's name. Lines of legal jargon followed, citing bogus grounds for arrest. At the bottom, a signature. Only it wasn't. It was a smear, clumsy, like someone had copied it off Google Images. Worse still, the judge named had retired 3 years ago. Sarah's jaw tightened. "They didn't just fake uniforms," she said. "They faked a court order." The deputy nodded grimly. "Sheriff, look at the footer." At the bottom, in tiny print, "Prepared by Community Compliance Division." Next to it, a logo, 2 overlapping houses inside a circle. Not county. HOA. Gasps rippled through the neighbors. Sarah read it aloud, every syllable like a hammer strike. "Prepared by Community Compliance Division." All eyes snapped to Gregory. His clipboard sagged in his hands. His face drained to chalk. That's not what it looks like," he stammered. But no one believed him. Not anymore. "Really?" Sarah turned slowly, the forged paper held high so every phone could capture it. Her voice carried like steel. "Because it sure looks like you paid imposters to wave around fake arrest orders, complete with forged signatures, and sent them to my door." Murmurs exploded across the lawn. Mr. Jenkins shouted, "He forged court papers?" Another neighbor added, "That's a felony." Gregory's hand shot up, trembling. "And no, listen. This was a misunderstanding. Clerical error. The compliance committee doesn't write warrants," Sarah snapped. Her tone cracked the air like a whip. "Courts do. Judges do. And you, Gregory Allen," she leveled a finger at him, "are no judge." Phones zoomed in, lenses locked on his blotchy face. Sweat ran down his temples. For years, Gregory had ruled Oakwood Heights with fines and fear, but now the crowd wasn't obeying. They were circling him. Sarah folded the paper cleanly, slid it into the evidence bag a deputy held out, and sealed it shut with a snap. "Chain of custody," she said firmly. This goes straight to the DA. Gregory's lips moved soundlessly, like a man praying with no words left. The neighbors closed ranks, whispers sharp as knives. All those fines, someone hissed. How many were even real? He's been pocketing money for years, another muttered. The sun was high now, but Gregory's world was collapsing into shadow. He had just been caught red-handed by the one person he could never bully. I glanced at Sarah. Her eyes weren't on Gregory anymore. They were on the evidence bag, the fake warrant that tied everything together. And in that look, I saw it. This wasn't just an HOA squabble. This was a conspiracy planned, funded, and documented. And we'd only just found the first thread. By the time the cruisers rolled away with the imposters, Oakwood Heights looked less like a neighborhood and more like a command post. Deputies cordoned off the street. Neighbors clustered in tense groups. Phones buzzed as local stations blasted push alerts. Fake police arrest attempt in Oakwood Heights. Sheriff targeted. Near the hood of a cruiser, Sarah stood with a sergeant, reviewing paperwork. The evidence bag lay between them, sunlight glaring off its plastic. "Sheriff," the sergeant said, grim. "We traced the footer. Community Compliance Division isn't county. It's a shell. It points to a private outfit, Community Security Solutions, LLC. Sarah's brow furrowed. "Cease," he nodded. "Out of Houston. They market themselves as custom neighborhood enforcement. HOAs hire them to handle violations. But they've been flagged twice before, trespassing, harassment. Nothing this bold, though." A chill slid down my spine. "So, they've done this before." "Not like this," the sergeant said. "These weren't mall cops. They had tactical gear, service pistols, forged warrants. Somebody funded them heavy." Sarah folded her arms, eyes fixed on the forged order. "And Gregory Allen signed the checks." As if summoned, Gregory shuffled forward, flanked by a deputy. His clipboard was gone, his hands restless. No longer a president, just a cornered bureaucrat. "Sheriff," he blurted, "you don't understand. This was supposed to be routine. They assured me they had authority. It was just compliance." "Stop." Sarah's voice cut clean through him. "You hired imposters. You gave them my name. You sent them to my home with forged documents and guns. That's not compliance. That's conspiracy." Gregory's mouth worked uselessly. The board voted." "The board didn't sign this contract," Sarah said, holding up the evidence bag. "You did." Neighbors surged closer, hungry for every word. "So that's where our dues went," Mr. Jenkins barked. "You risked our kids for this?" Another shouted. Gregory's face flushed scarlet. He stammered, "It's not like that. It's. But his excuses drowned beneath the rising roar of his neighbors. Phones filmed his every twitch, every bead of sweat. The sergeant tapped his tablet, turning it toward Sarah. "Sheriff, look here. Cease has been linked to incidents in 3 other subdivisions. One in Dallas," the sergeant said, voice low. "Family forced off their property after repeated compliance raids. Another in Baton Rouge. An elderly couple harassed with fake liens. And last year in Tulsa, an entire neighborhood fined for unauthorized mailboxes." Sarah's eyes narrowed as the pattern stacked up. "They weren't enforcing rules," the sergeant continued. "They were testing how far intimidation could go. And now Oakwood Heights. The names of cities hung in the air like a verdict." The crowd fell silent, the scale of it landing hard. This wasn't a local spat. It was a scheme tracing across state lines. "Community Security Solutions is under investigation. Starting now," Sarah said, voice clean and authoritative. "Every check, every notice, every so-called violation pushed through your board and their contractors is evidence." She turned to Gregory. "And you, Mr. Allen, are personally responsible for unleashing them on your neighbors." Gregory sagged as if someone had pulled the air out of him. I didn't know," he stammered. "You knew enough to write the checks," Sarah shot back. "You knew enough to sign the contract. You knew enough to target me because you thought your sheriff wouldn't fight back in her own neighborhood. A deputy opened another evidence bag with a formal snap and slid in Gregory's clipboard. Stamped invoices, line items, checks payable to Community Security Solutions, LLC. The sound of the seal closing landed like a judge's gavel. Whispers turned to accusations. All those fines, how many were legit? One neighbor hissed. He's been pocketing money for years, someone else muttered. By the time the cruisers rolled away, Oakwood Heights looked less like a sleepy block and more like a command center. News vans lined the curb. Deputies cordoned off intersections. The HOA clubhouse, usually half full on meeting nights, was packed wall to wall. I sat shoulder to shoulder in the back with neighbors I'd waved to for years but barely known. Tonight we weren't strangers. We were angry, restless, and demanding answers. Gregory took the lectern, clipboard gone but posture intact, until he started to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, let's keep order. This morning was an unfortunate. Unfortunate? Someone barked. They had guns. The room swelled with shouts and boos. Phones shot up like tiny lighthouses, recording everything. From the side of the room, Sarah stepped forward. The clubhouse quieted, not for Gregory, but for her. She spoke plainly. This morning, four armed men in fake police uniforms came to my home. They pointed loaded weapons at my husband. They waved a forged court order with my name on it. And they claimed authority under your HOA. Gasp spread. Even those who'd watched clips online looked stunned hearing it face to face. Sarah raised the evidence bag for all to see. The forged warrant sealed and tagged, bearing the HOA's logo and a footer that traced back to a shell division. Every phone zoomed in. That's not rumor, she said. That's evidence. It bears the fingerprints of one Gregory Allen. Gregory's face flushed. That's taken out of context, he began. No context justifies impersonating law enforcement. Sarah cut him off. No context justifies pointing firearms at civilians or endangering kids on their way to school. What you funded was criminal. The room shifted. Murmurs of agreement swelled into a roar. Where did our money go? Sarah asked, staring down the crowd they'd all trusted to manage dues and covenants. At that moment, a deputy wheeled in a projector. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. Raw footage from the morning played. Boots pounding our porch, my hand on the knob, the imposters' faces as they shoved forged paper forward. The room watched in breathless, horrified silence. For the first time, what had been scattered accusations coalesced into a single ugly truth. Oakwood Heights had been treated like a test case. One data point in a business model built on fear. And now everyone in the room saw how far that model could go. The projector's hum died. The lights flicked on, and Oakwood Heights erupted. The crowd had seen it all. Guns leveled at me. Sarah's radio crackling confirmation that no warrants existed. The four impersonators dragged into daylight. They'd watched Sarah drop the scar-faced man on the porch like a sack of flour. Now they weren't shocked. They were furious. Resign, a voice roared. You put us all in danger, shouted another. My kids were outside when this happened, a mother cried, tears cutting through her rage. Gregory's voice cracked, his usual calm evaporating. I acted in the community's interest. But Sarah raised her hand, and the noise cut like a blade. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. The community speaks for itself tonight, she said, each word slow, deliberate. And it says this: you abused your position. You endangered families. You hired criminals and called them officers. That ends now. The silence that followed burned hotter than the shouting. Gregory's allies on the board leaned back, refusing to shield him. Every set of eyes drilled into him. Even without cuffs, he looked like a man already condemned. I felt it too. Something had shifted. Oakwood Heights wasn't the same neighborhood it had been that morning. People weren't just angry anymore. They were awake. Sarah folded her arms. The floor is yours, she told the crowd. And with that, Oakwood Heights exploded into something we'd never seen before. Real democracy. Neighbors surged to their feet. Voices clashed like storm waves. Resign. Step down. You're done, Gregory. Phones rose high. recording every second like torches in a courtroom. Gregory stood trembling, his clipboard clutched like a shield, sweat bleeding through his collar. For years, he'd ruled Oakwood Heights with fines and threats. Letters slipped under doors like knives. Tonight, the walls were closing in. Sarah lifted her hand again. Not a shout, just the voice of command, steady as stone. Order. And they obeyed. Not for Gregory, for her. "You're HOA president," she said, pointing at Gregory like a judge naming the accused. "Authorized armed imposters to invade this community." He signed checks to Community Security Solutions, who dressed criminals in uniforms and sent them to my door with forged papers. That's not leadership. That's betrayal. Thunderous applause rattled the walls. "Throw him out. We're done with you, Gregory." Gregory's last defense cracked apart in his throat. "You're all overreacting. This was a mistake. Clerical. Administrative. Clerical doesn't point a gun at a homeowner," a man barked. "Clerical doesn't forge a judge's signature," shouted another. Bitter laughter rolled across the room. His words were ash before they even landed. Sarah stepped back. "This is your meeting. Your choice. You decide whether this man speaks for you tomorrow, or whether tonight, Oakwood Heights takes back its voice." The words struck like a match. Mrs. Parker, quiet, frail, the kind of neighbor who never raised her voice, rose from her folding chair. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "I make a motion to remove Gregory Allen as HOA president. Effective immediately." The clubhouse detonated with cheers. Dozens of hands shot up, phones filming every second. Gregory went pale, sputtering. "That's not in order. The bylaws. The bylaws require 30 days' notice." Sarah's reply was crisp as a gavel. "The bylaws don't shield felonies. Fraud voids authority. And tonight, the people have spoken." Gregory's allies shifted in their seats. One finally leaned toward his mic, voice low, resigned. "Seconded." The room froze. Then Sarah's eyes swept across the sea of faces. "All in favor?" A forest of hands shot up. Phones lit the room like 1,000 stars. Voices chanted in unison, rising like a storm. "Aye, aye, aye." Gregory Allen's reign over Oakwood Heights ended not with a signature, not with a gavel, but with the roar of his neighbors tearing his power away. Gregory clutched his clipboard like it might anchor him. His hands trembled. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came. The man who'd find neighbors for bird feeders and mailbox paint had nothing left to say. "All opposed?" Sarah asked. A silence answered, sharp, absolute. She borrowed the board chair's gavel and brought it down. "Motion carried," she declared. "Effective tonight, Gregory Allen is removed as president of the Oakwood Heights Homeowners Association." The room detonated. Neighbors hooped, hugged, and shouted. Phones buzzed with live streams that were already spilling the moment into the world. Even the local reporter in the back smiled, thumbs flying over his headline. Gregory sagged into his chair. The clipboard slid from his fingers and hit the floor with a hollow clatter. But Sarah wasn't finished. She cut through the cheers with a voice that made everyone straighten. "Listen," she said. "Tonight is not just about removing one man. It's about ending the culture of fear that lets someone think he could hire thugs in uniforms to control you. From now on, Oakwood Heights will not be ruled by threats. You will demand transparency. You will insist on accountability. You will lead yourselves." Her words rolled through the room like thunder. Faces lit with something I hadn't seen in months. Hope. Gregory found his voice at last, weak and trembling. "You don't understand. You've made enemies bigger than me, bigger than this neighborhood. They'll come after you." Sarah's eyes hardened. "Let them. I'll still be standing." Deputies closed in, not to arrest him then, but to escort him out. He walked slow, shoulders hunched, every step tracked by phones until the door slammed behind him. The clubhouse burst into cheers again, louder this time. I felt it in my bones. Oakwood Heights had turned a corner. The fear was gone. The people were awake. Sarah had lit the fuse, but Gregory's words, "bigger than me," echoed. Tonight felt like victory, not the end. The next morning brought a different kind of siren: media. News vans lined the curb, satellite dishes pivoting skyward. Reporters clustered at the end of the block as helicopters thumped overhead like circling hawks. By breakfast, Oakwood Heights was on every major channel. Clips from our phones replayed on loop. Boots pounding the porch, the imposters' faces, Sarah's badge flashing, the takedown on the porch. By noon, the headline read, "Sheriff's neighborhood targeted by fake cops, HOA president ousted." The district attorney stepped up to a podium flanked by flags and read charges: impersonating law enforcement, falsification of documents, conspiracy, reckless endangerment. Community Security Solutions, LLC, was now under federal review. "We will not tolerate criminal intimidation disguised as neighborhood enforcement," the DA said. A reporter shouted, "Will Gregory Allen face charges?" The DA's jaw tightened. "If evidence ties him to criminal acts, he will be prosecuted." Social media went volcanic. Hashtags trended: hashtag fake cops, hashtag HOA scandal, hashtag Sheriff Sarah. Memes bloomed, and Sarah's badge was photoshopped onto movie posters. Neighbors who used to hide behind curtains began speaking to cameras. Mrs. Parker, hair in rollers, told a reporter, "We were scared of Gregory. He fined me for a flagpole. Sheriff Sarah gave us our voices back." But beneath the noise, the threat still hummed. That night, Sarah sat at our kitchen table with files spread like a forensic map. Deputies had handed over stacks of invoices from Gregory's clipboard, payments routed from HOA dues to Community Security Solutions, line items marked compliance enforcement totaling tens of thousands. "This isn't just Oakwood Heights," she said, rubbing her temples. "CSS is running this play across 3 states. I looked at the papers under the lamp and felt the weight of it. What started as a neighborhood fight had blown into something corporate and systematic. We'd won a battle, but the war, if that's what it was, had just begun. They test boundaries to see how far intimidation will go," Sarah said, folding a file closed. I leaned against the counter and watched her. "And you were the pushback." She gave a tired, half-smile. "Now they know exactly who stood in their way." The weight of that landed in the room like a stone. Late that night, the phone rang and my stomach dropped. Sarah answered, voice steady. The governor's office wanted her in the Capitol by Monday to brief on community safety vulnerabilities. When she hung up, her expression had hardened. This wasn't an HOA problem anymore. The state wanted answers. I lowered my voice. "Gregory warned us, said it was bigger than him. What if he wasn't bluffing?" Sarah closed the folder, looked at me, eyes sharp and steady though weary. "Then we don't just clean up Oakwood Heights," she said. "We pull the curtain back on whatever's behind it. Once you start that, there's no going back." Outside, the street was quiet again. Cruisers and cameras faded into the night, but the quiet felt different. It wasn't peace. It was the hush before a storm. Oakwood Heights had won a battle. The war, stretching well beyond our block, had only just begun. 2 weeks later, the clubhouse stood empty. Dark windows, bare bulletin boards. Gregory had not gone quietly. Deputies cuffed him in daylight as neighbors cheered. Cameras recorded every step. Charges followed: conspiracy, fraud, reckless endangerment, misuse of funds. His clipboard, once a symbol of petty power, was logged as evidence. That same day, federal agents descended on Community Security Solutions' Houston office. News footage showed boxes hauled out, hard drives seized, executives led away in handcuffs. Reporters confirmed CSS contracts in a dozen neighborhoods across 3 states, each one now under scrutiny. Oakwood Heights breathed. Mailboxes bloomed with flags. Kids rode bikes without parents hovering at the curb. Neighbors thanked Sarah in the street. Some called her a hero. She only smiled and waved it off. "I did my job. But I knew better." She'd risked everything. Our home, our safety, our quiet life. One evening after the dust settled, we sat on the porch with coffee, the air cool and cicadas humming. For the first time in weeks, there were no flashing lights, no shouting, no microphones, just the ordinary darkening sky. "Oakwood Heights will rebuild," Sarah said softly. "But this isn't over." I frowned. Gregory's gone. CSS is finished. What more is there? She turned her gaze to the street, voice calm and certain. Gregory was a symptom. CSS was a tool. Someone funded them, pushed them, gave them cover. You don't build a network like that without deeper pockets and higher friends. Her words landed heavy. I remembered Gregory's warning, bigger than me, bigger than this neighborhood. Back then it sounded like bluster. Now it sounded like a forecast. We sat long into the night. Across the street, Mrs. Parker's porch light blinked on. Kids laughed down the block. Normal was returning, but beneath it something darker hummed. Sarah's badge flashed in the porch light. No longer just metal, but a line drawn between order and chaos. So what happens when the next wave comes? I asked finally. My voice was low. She didn't look away from the sky. Then we'll be ready. I wanted to believe her, and I did. Still, I couldn't shake the sense that Gregory's fall had only shown the enemy's face. Somewhere beyond Oakwood Heights, in quiet offices and closed boardrooms, the people who'd funded the scam were already watching. And this time they knew our names.